Welcome everyone. As Simon mentioned, my name is Dave Patrick. This is my talk, Introduction to Dataverse inside of Power Automate. I'd like to thank our sponsors. Without those folks, this wouldn't be possible. We really appreciate CSharpCorner, Mindcracker, everyone that's really helped out. What is that? MC something solutions. I apologize, but really these folks have made this available, made it not free, even though it's free to attend. It's not free. And by the way, we are running that fundraiser. So check out the donate here. I put up a cool little link to find it easily. If you go there and you have some funds to donate, they'd really appreciate it. So again, I've been doing this talk for a little while. When I first started it out, it used to be called Intro to CDS. And then Microsoft, as they like to do, changed the name. Then it was Intro for about a minute. It was Intro to DataFlex Pro, and then changed the mind on that. Now it's Intro to Dataverse inside of, wait a minute, it's not Microsoft Flow anymore. It's now called Power Automate, which contains Flow. So there's a reason I left this up there. As we go through some of the demos, you'll see in a couple of places the old naming convention still persists. So it's important to kind of know the history so that when you see certain terms, you go, oh no, okay, we're still in Dataverse. It's just they haven't gotten around to changing that part yet. So as I mentioned, what is Dataverse? Why would you want to use it? And then how would you use it in a flow with Power Automate? These are my three main takeaways. After this talk, I'd like you to understand what it is, central database out in the cloud, why you want to use it, how easy it is to use, how it helps you centralize your data. And then I'm a big hands-on person. Whenever I teach any of the courses at the university, I'm always saying, it's better if you actually do it. Let's get your hands on, let's try it, let's do a lab, let's do a tutorial, let's walk through and actually write some code. Or in this case, this is one of those low-code, no-code solutions. Let's configure something and see it run. That I think really helps to, doing the how helps with the why and the what. So as I mentioned, it used to be Common Data Surface, so we crossed that out. Now it's Dataverse. It's no longer DataFlex Pro. It is Dataverse. Again, just hammering the point home that we have changed the name, but we've settled on Dataverse now, so that's exciting. If you want more information on that, you can go to this link, and it will have tons of information. We're actually going to reference some of the information. This information, some of the tutorials and hands-on labs and exam prep is all part of Microsoft Learn. So Microsoft Learn is a great link out there on the Microsoft sites. It's more than just documentation. As I mentioned, it's exam prep, tutorials. Sometimes you have sandboxes you can use. So I'm going to reference some of that when we go through some of the information that we're talking about today. So Dataverse is part of the Microsoft Power Platform. I mentioned low-code platform. It talks to Office 365. It talks to Azure. It talks to Dynamics 365. It can talk to your standalone applications. It works well with Power BI. It's integrated with Power Apps, Power Automate, the new Power Virtual Agents. All of that know about Dataverse. And it's one of those, you've got different data connectors you can use to talk between the different data sources. There's the AI builder that's out there that plays nice with all this. And of course, Dataverse is one of the main components. So what is the Dataverse? Again, it used to be called the Microsoft or the Common Data Service. It's been renamed. They even put a note on their Microsoft Learn homepage about what is Dataverse to let you know that we're updating the articles to reflect the latest technology. One of the things they mention here is that Dataverse lets you securely store and manage your data. So your business applications have a place to centrally locate the data using the cloud securely. They do this through, role-based access. The data is stored in a set of what they're now calling tables, which I think is a real user-friendly term. Previously, they called them entities. If you're in the data administration, data design space, relational databases and all that, entities and attributes, that's, you're very familiar with that. But for some users that are just new to this, those power users, a table makes more sense. So a table, entity, really the same thing. Fields, attributes, same thing. Column. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about data that goes in like an Excel spreadsheet. You're going to have things like your name, your age, your salary. These are all attributes of a table, which might be the employee table or a customer table or an account table. Dataverse has a base set of standard tables that covers most of your typical scenarios like account, customer, employee. You can also create your own. I make my students create their own custom entities or custom tables They might create like a pet. In fact, I think we'll do that in one of our demos. We'll create a pet entity to keep track of the employees' pets or the customer's pets. So even if the typical standard tables don't meet your needs, you can extend Dataverse with your own custom tables. This is an example of what Dataverse looks like. I talked about getting hands-on and actually seeing, going to the portal. So in this particular view, we're looking at the Power Apps portal, and I've clicked over on the left-hand navigation, under data. It used to be called entities. This has been renamed. Now it's going to be tables. When we do the actual demo, you see it says tables now. But this shows you all the different, out of the box, the standard, as well as if there was any custom. We don't see any custom ones, but the standard entities here, things like account and address, and other ones too. There's a bunch that support the AI Builder tool set. So when you go to your Dataverse and you have your database first created, you can have all these standard entities available to you. Once you click on one of those entities or tables, you will have the columns or fields or attributes. Things like the account name, which might be identified as the primary field, the unique identifier for that, for a row in that, for an account in the account table. Account number, address, name, latitude, longitude. All these are attributes that are part of an entity or table in Dataverse. So why would you use this? So the first thing I mentioned, very easy to manage. You've got the metadata and the data stored in the cloud in one central place. Now, wait a minute. Dave, you said metadata. What the heck is metadata? Let me back up. Metadata is that data about data, right? So if we've got the account table and we have, well, what's part of an account record? Well, the account name is part of that record. That's a piece of metadata. The account number is also a piece of metadata. What about, is that text? Is that a number? Well, that's additional metadata, right? Oh, maybe it's an option, or maybe it's a number. Maybe it's unique. Whatever the different data types, whether it's required or optional, whether it's searchable, all that is metadata about your data, and it's all in one place. That's why Dataverse is so easy to manage and easy to use. Another reason, easy to secure. Data stored using Microsoft Cloud technology. You've got role-based security, so you can control access to the table for different users. You can have some users that have read-write, some only have read. Whatever configuration you need, it's available to very easily to create using your Dataverse. Another reason, accessing your data using 365. If you're using Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365, which is Microsoft's set of financial applications, customer relationship management, inventory management, those typical applications. I used to be a Microsoft Great Plains MVP, so I used to work in this field a lot. A lot of companies, very popular, use these tools and they want to access that data in other places. For example, maybe you're using Dynamics 365 to keep track of all your accounts, and you'd like to grab some of that data and put it somewhere else, maybe in a SharePoint list to make it easily accessible to users that aren't using your Dynamics 365 applications. You can do that using some of the tools and techniques we talk about, using a flow that talks to Dataverse and pulls that data out. So again, really easy access to that data. Some other reasons, rich metadata. So not just numbers and strings. You can have numbers, you can have choices, you can have required and optional, just a lot of different data types, a lot of different kinds of relationships, one to many, many to many, different kinds of rich set of metadata within Power Apps. Logic and validation, you can do things like define calculated columns, create business rules for validating, hey, is this address an actual real address? Is this phone number match the format a phone number should match? You can have workflows, hey, a new account's been created, let's go alert somebody. Business process flows to make sure the data is quality and not, remove any inconsistencies or inaccuracies. So really, really flexible in the sense that you can build this logic around your data. And then finally, productivity tools. So things like Microsoft Access. I know there's people out there that love Microsoft Access, and we're able to use that. There's actually add-ins built into Microsoft Access or that were created that are easily activated in Microsoft Access to talk to things like data in Dataverse, and we'll do a demo of that. So a lot of great reasons why we want to use Dataverse. Now let's talk about an example. I mentioned earlier, you could create an automated flow in Dataverse to do something like, if I get a new account, let's go put it into SharePoint so people without a license to Dynamics 365 can get notified of that new account. So in order to do that, we need to use a data connector. And there's a bunch of different data connectors. And this article goes through, this is one of those tutorials that I talked about that's part of Microsoft Learn that help us to go through and create this a connector. What you'll do is you'll go into Dataverse and you'll initiate, or excuse me, you'll go into Microsoft Power Automate and create a flow that will, when data comes into Dataverse, a new account, for instance, gets created in the Dataverse, we want something to happen. So we have to define what's called a trigger that's going to initiate this action, right? So what triggers are available? Well, in Dataverse, you've got triggers for when a record is selected, created, deleted, updated, and you can choose one, you can choose them all. The interesting thing is this represents the 4 basic database operations, right, known as CRUD, create, read, update, delete. So create is obviously created, read is select, update and delete it. And if you haven't heard the term CRUD before, as a database professional, you should learn it. CRUD, create, read, update, delete. Those are the 4 main database operations that any database application should support. And Dataverse absolutely supports that. It has triggers on each one of those. So when you go and you create a new flow and say, I want, define a trigger, you can select one or more of those for your trigger for your flow to be triggered from. So let's take a look at this. Let's go out there and do a quick demo. We'll jump out to our Power Automate window. So this is, I went over here to Power Automate, which for those of you who don't know, it's just flow.microsoft.com that redirects to the Power Automate, in my case, the English US version. And this is my portal. I'm logged into my environment, and we'll talk a little bit more about environments in a minute, but you can have multiple environments. So I'm in my developer environment, which is called the environment from my Mad SharePoint tenant. And then in that environment, I can do things like look at the data and look at the table. So earlier I mentioned that on the left-hand side, it was entities, and now it's been updated. So that's good news there. They're making progress getting all the new terms in there. So by clicking on the left-hand side and clicking on tables, it's going to show me all of the tables, also known as entities, that I have in my database. So you see there's the account that we talked about. There's things like activity, address, appointment, all standard ones. Look, I actually added a custom one called for cats. I want to actually keep track of different cats. Looks like I have another custom one for dogs. So depending on what your needs are, what your business requirements are, you can create new tables for your custom entities, or you can use the existing one. So let's look at the account one first. That's the standard one that's existing. I think I have some data in here. The first thing we're going to see when I click on this is it's going to load up that metadata that we talked about. So these are all the columns that are associated with the account, with an account in my accounts table. You can see if there's any relationships that have been defined. You can see there's some one-to-many ones. So, things like, if there's an owner team, might be multiple teams that own this account, any business rules, any views, different views of the account. And we want to see active accounts versus inactive accounts. You can see different forms that are used to interact with the account, like the main form to add a new account or view account data. You can see different dashboards. I didn't define any for this one, but you could define a dashboard to give you things like KPIs, knowledge performance indicators. You can define charts, keys, and then the last one is the actual data. So all this prior to this is sort of the metadata. And then when we finally click that last one, here's the accounts that I have in this particular database. And this is just demo data. When I talk later about how to get started with Dataverse, I'll talk about signing up for a demo account, and one of the options is to load demo data. So this is some of the demo data that I loaded. But yeah, clicking on any one of these, I should be able to edit the record right from the Dataverse portal inside of Power Automate, and I can go in and make changes and look at the data and add new accounts, delete accounts, whatever I need to do. All those create, read, update, delete operations that you would expect to be available in any database, I can do from this portal. So I'll come in here, and let's just update this guy. We'll say this is, maybe they moved up. Now they're 6th coffee. Or no, I guess if they move up, they would go the other way, right? 4th coffee. We're trying to get to be 1st. Right now they're 4th. So let's go ahead and save and close that. That's how easy it is to go in there and be able to access one of the entities, one of the records in my account table, make a change using the Dataverse portal inside of Power. I said I got here from Flow, but you'll notice that when I clicked on data from Flow, it did redirect my URL to the Power Apps portal. So that's the integration that we talked about. Power Apps and Flow are so integrated that even though if you go to Flow first and then you click on data, it's going to move me over to the Power Apps portal just because they all work together. They're all pointing at the same set of data, right? So I come here to Flow. As soon as I click on data, it's going to take me in my URL to Power Apps. So just be aware that it's not like I did, there's any sleight of hand there. That's the integration that makes everything so kind of smooth and run pretty easy. All right, so let's go and let's see, grab this guy here. Let's go and create a new flow. So we'll come over here to our flows and see if I've got any flows already created. What I want to do, again, taking that scenario of a manager came to me and said, Dave, every time a new account shows up in Great Plains, all the people who use Great Plains knows about it, but we'd like some of these other users that don't use Great Plains to be aware. Can you put that data out on SharePoint? Yes, I can do that. So I'll use Flow inside Power Automate to make that happen. I'll come in here and I'll do a new flow. And what I'm going to do is you'll see if you've never created a new flow before, there's lots of different options. And this can be a little overwhelming. It's great, lots of power, lots of flexibility, but the con to this is that sometimes you're like, wow, where do I start? So there's templates you can start from. This is really nice when you're not sure, all the actions that you need to do, what triggers, what actions, and you can read through these. You can see, oh, there's one for posting MSN weather, there's one for integrating with Outlook, there's one for integrating with Gmail. So again, great to have all this flexibility. A little overwhelming, right? Sometimes you have to kind of, hey, I'm just trying to do something from SharePoint, and this helps a little bit by filtering some of the things you can do. It'll filter some of those templates, or I'm going to type that here, SharePoint. You could also do, but it's a little tricky, and the reason I point this out, so let's put in Dataverse and see what comes up. So we got a couple here, email, blah, 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 blah. Let's keep it simple. We're going to come back to our flows, and we're going to just create one from blank. The particular example, oh yeah, it said it couldn't find any matches based on Dataverse. It hasn't quite been updated yet. So let's go create a new flow. We're going to create it from blank. We're actually going to create an automated cloud flow. And automated means it's going to be triggered by some action. In this case, it's going to be triggered when someone creates a new account. We could also do an instant cloud flow where someone requests the flow to manually starts the flow. You can do one based on a date and time, a scheduled flow. You could do a desktop-based flow or a business flow. We're going to just do an automated cloud flow, and we'll give this a name. We'll call this new account notification. And now we say, okay, what's the trigger? And we mentioned we want this whenever someone adds a new account. So the tricky part here is to figure out, well, if I type account, that's not really going to do it. Oh, I know, it's Dataverse, right? So I'll type in Dataverse here and look for any triggers based on Dataverse. So again, this is in those situations where the documentation, or in this case, the tools are not quite up to date. So if I type common data, I'm going to get the actual triggers I'm looking for. Remember, common data service is Dataverse. So when the record's deleted, well, that's not what I want, but that is one of the four. When the record's updated, when the record's created, there's the one I want, right? When a record gets created, I want to do something. I want to create a new item in SharePoint. So let's select that one. We're going to create that. So now the next step is we're going to say, what environment are we reading data from? And I mentioned earlier that I was in my development environment, so I'm going to make sure I match that, right? I'm in the David Patrick environment, so down here when we pick environments, it's got to be the same one. Now later when I move this to production, I'll have to obviously make sure they're both, match SharePoint. So just be, during development, make sure you pick the right environment that you're working in, the same environment that you started out in. So the data that I was looking at was from David Patrick's here, and with my flow, I'm going to read from that same environment. The next thing is to choose one of the, and then here's another example where it used to, we know it's table now, but this still says entity. So we just got to remember that, the terms table is the same as entity. So what entity do we want? We want accounts. And then finally, what scope do we want this to? Is this just for a single business unit, a single organization, a child, child business unit, or one user? I want this for everyone, right? So I want this from anyone in my organization. If they add a new account, this is going to trigger this flow. So now the next thing, I've got my trigger configured, is to configure an action. When in flows, you have triggers and then you have actions. This, when a record gets created, what are we going to do? We said we were going to put a new item in a SharePoint list that someone can see. So we'll go and, again, kind of overwhelmed by all the choices here, but again, we can type in SharePoint and find just, SharePoint action. So in this case, example, we can scroll down here. We can see, what are some of the different actions and what might we want to do. In our case, we said we want to create a new item, so that's what we're looking for there. Creating a new item, it doesn't say new, but creating an item in SharePoint, and that's the actual action that we want. So go ahead and select that. And it's going to come up and say, okay, what address do you want to connect against and what list do you want to connect against? Now, if we want to go against an existing SharePoint server, we can go ahead and choose some, and I've got one called accounts already. I got a whole bunch of others, but let's go create a new one. Let's pretend this is a new requirement. So I'm going to go out to my SharePoint site. This is my SharePoint site, Mad SharePoint, and I'm going to create a brand new subsite that's going to contain these new account notifications. So I'm going to go out to my site contents and create a new subsite. And we'll go subsites, and we'll create new. And we'll call this, again, new account notifications. Abbreviate NAN. If you've never created a subsite or in SharePoint, you've got different templates you can choose from, team site, project site. I'll keep it simple. We'll just go with team site. Same permissions, all looks good. We can always change this later if we need to. So I'm just creating a new subsite on my SharePoint Online instance, and it doesn't have to be a SharePoint Online instance. I could have used an on-premises. I could have used a different tenant, but in this case, I made it the same tenant to just keep everything pretty simple. So in this new site, I'm going to add a new list. So typically in the classic SharePoint, I might go over to site settings and do add an app. And that's fine, because when it comes up with add an app, it's really apps or lists. It's always been a pet peeve of mine, though, because apps are slightly different than lists. What I do like is now here, I can actually say, oh, I want an app or I want a list. So in this case, we want a new list. And what list are we going to create? We're going to create, we'll just do a custom list. We'll do a blank list. This will be new account notifications, new accounts. It's new accounts. And create. And when I create a brand new list in SharePoint, it's going to give me what? A title column, an ID column that's hidden. Maybe I'll add one more column, right? I've got one column now. That's the name, the title that'll represent the name of the account. And maybe I want to know like the phone number, right? So we'll add one more single line of text that'll just represent the account phone number. And do that and save that. All right, so we got a real simple list that's going to be who the account is and what their account phone number is. So now we can tell our SharePoint folks, go to this list whenever we hire up a new account, whenever we get a new account in Dynamics, Flow will run and it'll put it here. So let's make that happen. So back to our flow, now we've got that site address. Let's go grab that. So here's our site. We don't need the whole thing. We just need this new subsite URL. So I'll grab that. And we'll paste that in here. Now notice it's not, if I scroll through here, you won't see that because the trigger when I first created it went out there and it looked at my existing sites and it enumerated through them. It says this is, here's your choices. That's okay, I can put in the new one. It's going to now go and look at that site, make a call to that, and then verify it's actually a site. Go out there, let's try that again. Custom value. Oh, I forgot. I have to make sure I say custom value. So that tells Flow, hey, this is a new, this is a new, not in the list. You've got to go visit it and then get a list of any list that I can access. And that's what happened there. But when I put in this new address, it did go out there and it said, oh, there is a bunch of, well, there's not a bunch. There's one list that you can use, new accounts. So that's what I want. So we'll go ahead and select that. Any advanced options. If I needed to limit the columns, maybe there's too many columns, I could use a view to not access all the columns. This is what I'm really interested in. What am I going to put in the title when this new item gets created? This trigger saying create a new item. What are you going to put in the title, and what are you going to put in that other field I created, the account phone? So in the title, I want the account name. So notice under here, it says account dynamic content. These are all those columns, also known as attributes, that from my table / entity. So you've got things like the account name, the account number, the city that is in their address. So I want the account name. Let's go pick that. And I'm going to map that to title. And I also said I want the account phone number. So that's a little trickier. Let's type phone and see if we can find phone in this list. There's a lot of choices. There's address 1 phone, address 2 phone. And sometimes it's, when I first did this, I picked the first phone. And then when I entered new data, it didn't show up because it wasn't really the first phone. The form that I was using to enter data was actually showing the main phone. So through trial and error, I learned this is the phone I want to choose if I want the phone that's on the main form. So we'll go ahead and select address phone to put into the main phone. So that looks good. We'll go ahead and save that. And now we have our flow fully filled out. What environment, which table / entity, who's this for? It's ready to go. We recommend you test it. So let's go ahead. Now there's a couple things up here that are kind of neat. This flow checker is cool. It'll help me to make sure I've got all my inputs put in there correctly. So if I had left something blank, it might have showed an error or a warning, but I filled in everything, so no problem. It would give me a little red dot if it was a problem. The other thing is this test, which says, hey, prep this to go. We're ready to test it. So let's do that and say, hey, we're ready to test this. We're going to manually perform the action. So I'm going to go out there into Dataverse and enter a new account that will trigger this flow. If I had run this flow previously, I could do an automatic test and reuse a previous run. This is the very first time I'm doing it, so there's no previous runs to do. But that helps. That way you're not constantly entering new test data just to test out your flow. You can just run it over and over again with the previous values in a previous flow. So we're going to start off manually. Let's go ahead and we're going to test it. So back out to our portal, and there's our account data. Let's add a new record. So we're going to add a record, and let's see. So we got a new account. Maybe we're working with McDonald's now, right? It's near lunchtime. I'm thinking of food. So McDonald's sounds good. We're going to go and add the McDonald's account. And their phone number is 555-1234. And what's their area code? There we go. All right. And I can fill out all the other information. We're keeping it real simple. Let's go ahead and save that. If everything was put together correctly, we have this new account in our Dataverse, which shares the data with Dynamic CRM. It should have gone to our flow and kicked off a new flow. So let's go see. Let's go to our flow overview page. This shows us the name of the flow, who created it, what the status it's on. We didn't turn it off. Who it connects to, the different connections. And down here, we'll see the runs. Now, it does take a minute. I just created this. Oh, there it goes. There's my first run, and it was succeeded. It took about a second. Awesome. And if I really want, I can click on that and get even more details about the run. I can see things like the inputs, what environment did it go against, what entity or table did it go against. It actually has the output shown in JSON notation. If you're not familiar with JSON, JavaScript object notation, it's basically attribute value pairs in this, curly bracket, quoted, delimited notation here. But this is helpful sometimes when I was looking, when the first time I did this and the phone number was, I went into the JavaScript and I saw that the phone number was blank because I had chosen the wrong phone number and I had to go back and do it. So sometimes it's helpful to go through and look at the, and see what data is being passed. And you get similar information down here of to the action. What site did it use? Which list did it use? What data actually got put into the list, and who was it put in there by? So really great information. When it works, maybe not that useful. When it doesn't work, definitely useful to go in here and help you debug what might have went wrong. So let's see in SharePoint, did it add? There it is. So there's a new McDonald's. Oh, look, I did get the account phone. Did I mess up on the phone? Maybe I chose the wrong phone. I said I messed up last time. Maybe I messed up this time. So refreshing here, it looks like I got the wrong phone. Let's go see what went wrong with that. So back to our flow and see if we can see where the phone went wrong. So let's edit our flow. Let's look at the mapping that we did. Oh, look at that. So when I you can see it says address 1 telephone. So that's not the one we want. Let's get rid of that. We want the main phone. How I chose the other one. That's the main phone, right? What did I oh, so before I chose address phone, but I meant to choose main phone. But again, a great way to debug, right? Now, I guess what I could have done is gone into that JSON and seen that was blank. I kind of glossed over that. But yeah, so after we ran our flow, we did our test, the flow executed successfully, but it did not fulfill the requirement. In this case, we thought the phone number should have came through. We didn't. So we had to go back through, make a change. Now let's rerun it. So everything's still looking good. Let's do a test. And this time we're going to do it automatically with the data that we just did previously. So we don't have to go and enter a new record. Let's go run that test. Looks like it's running okay. Give it a second. That loan also looks running. Now let's go into those outputs and make sure the phone came through okay. We'll go over here to the. There we go. So now we can see in the body in the JSON that the phone number actually was passed as expected. And if we go over here to the second run, look at that. Yay, we created our flow. We did it wrong the first time. Then we fixed it. We did it right the second time. All right, that's exciting news. What are some other things that we can do with flow? You know, I mentioned you can create new entities. So if in our list of tables, and I keep using tables and entities interchangeably, but if I've got a new table I need to keep track of, I can certainly come in here and say, hey, they want me to keep track of bonuses. So let's go in here and create a new bonus, right? Different bonuses that people have. Notice I gave it to the display name of bonus, and it comes up with a plural name. The account, the database gurus out there, you know, love that. Hey, you should use singular for the table name, whatever. So there's my bonus. This is also bonuses. We're going to create the bonus name will be the main display. Notice it uses a special prefix that indicates it's custom. I can choose whether I want to enable attachments or not, but this particular one, maybe there's a letter or a picture that, you know, this is why this person's getting a bonus. And then there's all sorts of other settings I can fill out if I need to. We'll go ahead and just create that, just to give you an example of what a brand new entity or table might look like. So there we are. We've created our new bonus. It's got just one column. If it had some additional columns, I could go into that and add additional columns. So we could come, in fact, there are some standard columns that come along. This is that system metadata, right? Things like who it was created by, when it was created on, who it was modified by. So there's some standard system data that you're going to get with any table that you add. But if I want to add a new column, I could come in here and say, you know, the bonus is, you know, maybe the reason for the bonus. So that's optional. So maybe we just give people bonus, or maybe we make it required, right? Because you can't, don't be giving bonuses for no reason. So whatever, you know, why did you give this bonus type of thing? Like that. So just like if we were designing, you know, the set of data that we want to capture, I was going to say doing database design. This is very similar if you're familiar with database design in other systems like Microsoft Access or SQL Server. We're coming in here and we're, you know, creating these new tables and adding columns to the table and defining whether they're required or optional and the different data types and all that good stuff. So Dataverse has all that capability that if you're familiar with those other types of data design tools, they're all available in Dataverse. So let's go in and look at this data using one of our favorite tools, which is Microsoft Excel. So back to my set of tables, let's use accounts because I didn't enter in. Well, let me show you entering a new bonus and then we'll come back. So if I wanted to enter a new bonus here, again, we could come to our data and now we could add some bonuses. And let's go, let's do data. Let's edit in Excel if we can. So we'll open this up in Excel. So when I click open in Excel, what it's doing is it's opening an Excel document that has an add-in that's smart and knows how to talk to Dataverse. And it's also even configured with my credentials and it's connected. So Excel popped up over my other screen. I'll just drag it over here and I'll enable editing. This is the Dataverse add-in for Excel that's going to, now that I enabled it, is going to go and load. It's going to try to sign into a Dataverse or Power Apps or Flow, the whole Office 365 environment. And then it's going to connect to my environment, specifically to the bonus name entity or table that I just created. And that's what it's doing here as this little wheel spins. It made that connection. So let's add a few records here. We'll go ahead and click new and add, we'll say there, and maybe what we'll do is we'll define, well, we'll just say, there's a $1,000 bonus. And this is for, showing up one time. I can't spell. Maybe there's a $500 bonus for giving a talk. Maybe there's a $250 bonus for passing an exam. And you get the idea. So we can make up these bonuses here. I put that in the wrong column. There we go. And the different reasons. Oops, spell that. Once I've added my records, I can post them or publish them to Dataverse, right? So I'll go ahead and say publish. It went out there. And this is one of the things that surprises people. A lot of times when you're working with data in Microsoft Excel, it's read-only. You pull data down and you play with it. You do different graphs, but you never write data back. There are some situations where you can. Simon missed my daughter, Sarah. She showed me not too long ago how you can, there's an add-in in Excel to take data and create a new SharePoint list. It's not really an add-in, it's up in the ribbon. The secret is you have to create the table first, and then it knows how to send that up to SharePoint. But this is another situation where you can write back to your data source using this add-in. So let's go see if we did that. We'll go ahead and close this and go back to our data source and see if we have any data. So we'll just click off and click back on. And look at that. So now in our custom table, we've got 3 rows of data because we used Excel to enter the data and publish it back up to Dataverse. So Dataverse is very flexible. You can go to the portal and add different data. You can do it from applications like Dynamic CRM. You can do it through Excel using the add-in that's built in I could send that Excel spreadsheet to other folks and they could reuse that as well. So a lot of different options. Let's do one more thing. Let's go back to our account and let's add. Let's see that in Excel. So let's open that data in Excel. And what I want to do is when I add a new account, we should see our flow still trigger because it doesn't matter if I add the record through the Dataverse portal from Power Apps or Excel using the add-in, right? Either way, the Microsoft Flow trigger or the Microsoft Power Flow trigger that we created can be triggered any way that the data gets in there. So this time when we're editing, now we're editing the existing accounts table, and we should see a ton of accounts, right? This particular entity or this particular table has hundreds of rows. It might take a second as it pulls down all the different data. And I can do more than just add data, right? So I could come here, I can do create, read, update, delete. So if I want to, I could come in here and change this. Maybe they're now finally first coffee, they did that work. Maybe this guy is deleted, so we'll get rid of litware, they're gone. And then down here, let's add one new one. Let's do the trifecta here. So not only is McDonald's an account, but Burger King as well has become an account. So let's go ahead and publish all those changes. So we're going to create one row, Burger King. We're going to update 6th coffee or 5th coffee to 1st coffee, and we're getting rid of litware. So do it. Do all 3 of those operations. So we did read when we read all the data down, and now we've done update, delete. Let's go see the change in our account table. So we'll go to our data here, and look at that. 1st coffee, litware is gone, and if we scroll down here to Burger King, there's Burger King. All by using Excel, using a great add-in that talks all of our updates to Dataverse very easily. All right, hopefully that demo gave you a real good taste of creating a new flow, looking at the different tables in the Dataverse, triggering your flow, seeing the results in SharePoint, looking at the flow, looking at the results, getting into the JSON, exporting and importing the flow. I skipped that. Let me jump back to that. So if I want to share my flows, there is an opportunity if we go to our flows back in Power Automate. So you know what? This is great. I want to save send a copy. I can email a copy to someone. I could now I should have mentioned that in my development environment that feature is disabled. So if I want to share, I'd have to move this out to a production environment, my Mad SharePoint environment. Then that would actually allow me to send a copy to someone. But development is just for me, so I can't really do it. They should grade that out, but that's okay. They gave me the warning. I can save it as a template. I can save it as a different name if I want to have a copy of the flow just to work on. Maybe I save this one, but now I want to make a new one and just add to it. So one of the really cool things, if I go back to my flows, is to export it, right? So you can actually come in here and you can say, hey, I'm going to export this flow as a zip. And that way I can then really just take it and email it to someone, and then they can take it and import it into their own environment, right? So if I export this flow as a zip, it's going to allow me to download that zip file and then do whatever I want with it. So we'll give it a name. We'll call this NAN. What environment was this one? My environment, new accounts, SharePoint, something like that. Down here is all the package content, the different settings. When someone imports it, what's it going to do? They're going to have to know the name. Maybe give this that says I give them an opportunity to either update the name or update the package if it already exists, or create a new one. So whatever I want that import step to be configured as. Also the connections, right? So by default they have to select the connection during import. They're going to have, if someone else takes my package and imports it, they have to define what. I used my connection, but they're going to have to find their own connection. So once this is as I like it, I can do an export, and that's actually going to create that zip file that I can download and share with people. So there it is out there. Where did it put it there? I put it in, I think I put it in my downloads folder. Yep, it's out there in my downloads folder. So let's see if we can import it back in. So back to my flows, and now let's import one. And actually what I should do is switch my environment. So let's see if we can do that. Let's go back to, close this guy, go back to my environment. So I'm going to switch to my production environment, Mad SharePoint. And when I switch environments, I'm actually switching databases, right? So in my development database, I had McDonald's and Burger King and all that. When I switch this environment, I've got a whole different set of flows here. I've got a different set of data in my Dataverse. So if I go to my tables and accounts, you won't see McDonald's, you won't see Burger King. In fact, I think I have very little data in my production environment. This is my Mad SharePoint user group site, so we don't really use it for anything. So in my production environment, if I go to accounts and look at data, I think I've got like 6 rows of data. Yeah, so not a whole lot of data, but that's the important. So when you switch environments, you're switching, all different flows, all different copy of Dataverse. It's a completely different environment. So in this environment, if I want to go to my flows, I can see if I can import that other flow that I just exported, right? Because it won't exist here. So let's go to my flows, and we'll see if we can do an import. So we'll say, hey, let's see. Let's go to, well, go back. And it looks like I have that turned off in this environment. That's okay. Let me switch back just to show you the import steps back to date to my developer environment. Go to my flows. So once I'm in my flows, let's go over there to my data, make sure I got everything copacetic. I'm just verifying I switched to my new environment. Yep, it looks good. And then this should have all the data. Yep, okay, great. So back to my flows. And let's do this. Looks like I turn off my import. Okay, well, I'm running low on time, so I'll save that for another demo. But basically what I would do is I'd grab that zip and import it. And then when you import the flow, it comes up with options to say, choose your connections, choose your environment, choose all the different options that were defined when we exported it. And then it would show up under my flows as a new flow with a new name potentially if I chose a new name on the import. All right. Talked a little bit about a demo environment and the production environment. You can also have trial environments. Trial environments are nice because they can be converted to production. So you can start off working with Flow, you get 30 days, they don't cost you anything. And if you like what you built, if you spent time in that environment and you want to start using it for real, you can upgrade your trial environment to a production environment. If you want to get started just testing Power Apps, testing Dataverse, there's the Power Apps community plan. All my slides have links built into them. So when you click on the actual slide, it brings up the site. So in this example, this is the community plan where you can sign up and get started for free. You can get that developer environment and you get everything that I had where you sample data, you're able to create flows. And the one thing you can't send the copy, you can't share them, but you can still export flows and do all that stuff. So that's really generous of Microsoft to make the Power Apps community plan available for free. It talks about the different things that are included. So it's not just Power Apps and Flow, but you get the Dataverse, you get data connections, you get pretty much almost a complete Office 365 environment. In the Dynamics 365 Administration Center is where you can go in, as one of the places you can go in and see different types of environments. So I mentioned that there's production environments, there's a development environments, there's trial environments, there's even a sandbox environment that you can create, where when you go create a sandbox, again, it's a way to do some testing, and then later you can say, hey, I want to do something else with this environment. Well, what are some tips and tricks? Watch out for that missing Dataverse. When you go in, you're looking for a trigger, and you type Dataverse and nothing shows up. You got to type in Common Data Service. It may still say entity, even though it's table. So just be careful that some of the terms and technologies may not be updated just yet. Using that flow checker helps. So if you've got any trouble with your flows, you can use the flow checker to see if you're missing a value or have an invalid value. One thing I forgot to mention was team flows versus my flows, where if you share a flow with someone, it'll move from the team flows to the my flows tab. And sometimes when you're looking for flows, that can get confusing. This is just some of the examples. You're looking for, depending on what you're choosing, you might not see the right trigger. So just try a couple different things. Another thing I ran into is when you first get started, when you first sign up for that community plan, you might, when you click on data, get no solutions found. You've got to create your new environment. If you're just getting started, make sure you create the new environment. And when you create that new environment, you've got to then create your database, right? So if it's a trial, you'll do your 30-day trial. If you use the community plan, you'll do a development environment. You'll sign up, you'll click through all this, you'll create your solution, create your database. One last tip, don't do it too quickly. So here I chose my currency and all that. I created my database. I went to my solutions looking for my database and said, hey, something went wrong. I was just too fast, just got to give it a minute. I waited a minute. I think I went up and got a drink. I came back, hit refresh, and then it was created. So when you're working with these cloud-based solutions and resources, you got to give everything a minute to provision. Don't expect it to be instant. I created my database. You got to give it a second. I was too hasty there. Give it a second. It works just fine. Another resource, the Office 365 Developer Plan, which has been renamed to the M365 Developer Plan, is really great. That gives you Power Apps, Office 365, SharePoint Online. So you get a sample developer sandbox. It gets renewed every 90 days. It's good for 90 days, but as long as you're using it, Microsoft will renew it. I've had one for years, and it's free. Allows you to do all sorts of testing and playing out. Even allows you to load sample data packs. So another really great resource from Microsoft is this Office 365 or M365 Developer Plan that they're calling it now. So that's my talk. Hopefully you got now you know why or what is Dataverse, why you would want to use it, and how you could get started using it.